So last year, there were a lot of people who were disappointed to know that the iPad mini didn't feature a Retina display, but with the second generation model, they've kind of cleared that, obviously, with the inclusion of that Retina display. Beyond the display, the iPad mini this year is treated with all the upgrades we'd expect to find. So it has beefier hardware specs, a nice premium construction, and an updated iOS 7 experience. Well, there's nothing really new with the design of the iPad mini with Retina display. It employs the same distinctive design as its last year's model, so it still has a nice premium finish to it. Now, the design isn't new here just because it still employs the same iconic design as before, and seeing it has a larger panel, 7.9 inches, it's a lot wider than those 7-inch tablets out there, so you might have to stretch your hand just a little bit. But the nice thing about the iPad mini second generation is just that it still has all the quality elements that we like in a very compact tablet. It's streamlined thin, it has a good weight and feel in the hand, and on top of that, it just has a premium element with that brushed aluminum casing. Of course, there are going to be a lot of people happy this time around that the iPad mini features a Retina display. So higher resolution screen, still same 7.9 inches. The resolution jumps at 2040 by 1536, giving it a pixel density count of 324 pixels per inch. A lot of sharpness to it, of course, and it's still an IPS LCD panel. With the higher resolution display in tow this time around, of course, it's able to deliver some crisp looking details. Even the web browser, even the finest of text, more than legible even from a normal viewing distance. Seeing that the screen relies on IPS LCD technology, there's a lot of quality elements about it. First of all, superior outdoor visibility. It has a strong brightness output, so it makes outdoor visibility really easy in the eyes. Secondly, it sports some very wide viewing angles, and you can see it maintains its clarity. There's no distortion even at the widest angles. And as far as color reproduction, it's nice, but it's not as vibrant when compared to the iPad Air. It's just a little bit more subdued. It's a year late, no doubt, but we're happy nevertheless to know that the iPad mini this year sports a higher resolution Retina display, something we wanted with the original model, but hey, it's here, so we can't complain about it. Sorry folks, there isn't a biometric Touch ID fingerprint sensor here, so it's just your typical home button, recessed, but still has a nice responsive feel when it's pressed down. Above the display, there is a light sensor and a front-facing 1.2 megapixel camera. Taking a peek around its edges, on the right side we have its separated volume controls and the mute switch. Up top we have the distinguishable and raised power button, one of the microphones, and you also have 3.5mm headset jack. And finally, along the bottom edge we have those dots which consist of its dual speakers, and you have the lightning docking port for charging and data connectivity. And finally, in the rear, we have its 5-megapixel autofocus camera, which features an f2.4 aperture lens, a backside illuminated sensor, digital image stabilization, and 1080p video recording. In terms of storage options, the iPad mini with Retina display is available in either 16, 32, 64, or 128GB versions, and it starts out at $400, with each model going up $100. Okay, so the iPad mini with Retina display is running iOS 7, so if you're using an iOS device right now, this should be a very familiar one. Nothing really different about it, but regardless of that, it's just nice that we have that updated experience over last year's offering. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about what's new here with the iOS 7 experience, just again because it's the same thing we find on other recent devices out there, but it still lays claim to having a very simplified experience. You could tell here with the home screen with its typical grid-like view, but it does get treated to some really nice visual changes, a lot of translucency, new font, and a flatter overall design. Notifications are handled in the same manner. Just swipe down from the top bezel, we gain access to the notification center. This is where it aggregates all notifications, and the cool thing, it has that nice translucency effect with it. Conversely, when we swipe up from the bottom bezel at any time, we jump right into its control center, and from here we gain access to some connectivity features. We can adjust the volume and even the brightness of the display. Being an iPad, the experience again retains the same gestures from before. So for example, if you want to close down or minimize an application, we can just use the 5-finger pinch gesture. Automatically will minimize it. We have also the swipe method where we can jump between open applications very quickly. So we could just swipe left or right, and from here we could gain access to all the different open applications. And if we want to see all of them simultaneously, we can just swipe up, and from here we get the windows here, so we can jump into any of them at any time. And they're all just very useful and practical. Overall, the iOS 7 experience here with the iPad mini Retina display is a very refreshing one over last year's model. Of course, the visual changes are all appreciated, but at the same time, it still adheres to having a very simplified experience, which is the thing we come to expect out of iOS in general. Just like some of the other recent devices from Apple, the iPad mini with Retina display is most notable for featuring a 64-bit base processor, a rarity still in the space of course. It's actually a dual-core 1.3 GHz Apple A7 chip, and it's coupled with the PowerVR G6430 GPU. So when it comes to simple things like opening up applications, it exhibits a really nice snappy feel, instantaneous with all of its operations. And naturally, that 64-bit base processor is going to help out when it comes to gaming, but right now, it's still just a matter of developers getting used to it and offering games that take advantage of it, but nevertheless, it still has a really great performance with high-intensity stuff. The on-screen keyboard is the same from before, so nothing really different about it. It's nice and responsive and quick to the touch. And as far as usage, we prefer using the on-screen portrait one just because our thumbs are able to encompass the entire layout. And of course, some people will appreciate the split style option. But if you're going to be using the landscape one, you're going to try to use it normally like you would on any other keyboard. It just feels a little bit cramped. For the most part, the web browsing experience here doesn't change, but with the addition of that Retina display, it's just icing on the cake here, just because it's able to produce some very sharp looking details, so it just makes pages pop with a lot more clarity. Beyond that, it does all the qualities we like about the experience. You have some instant page loads here, very quick with that. You have page renderings on the fly, and navigational controls are nice and smooth. With the introduction of iOS 7, we see an update to the presentation of the music player, but generally speaking, it's still a very conventional looking one. As far as the audio quality from its dual speakers, we gotta say it's very potent and strong, and it even offers a hint of bass with its output. It's great watching high-definition videos on the iPad mini with Retina display. Of course, that high-resolution screen really helps out. But as far as codec support, it's very limited. You gotta do a lot of conversion for 1080p videos so they load properly onto it. The camera app is pretty barren of any manual controls or shooting modes. The only things we're presented with are the standard photo mode. We could select HDR mode if we want to. We could switch to video. There's even a square shot mode. Now, even though it lacks any deep controls or anything like that, it's just nice that the experience is simplified, so the emphasis is just on taking the shot. Luckily, its 5-megapixel camera is really good for a tablet, so if you're inclined to use it, then you're going to be pleased by what you see. Now, there's just a good fine balance with outdoor shots. You get some nice details in the shots. Colors, depending on how you capture them, it either could come out a little bit saturated, or sometimes it has a very natural stance. And of course, exposure seems to be handled very well by the camera. Under lower lighting conditions, though, we tend to see a lot more noise, which in turn, of course, softens its details, but it's still pretty good. At the same time, we're very content with its 1080p video recording quality. It just has some nice looking visuals, crisp looking details. You have gradual exposure, so it's not too jerky or finicky. You have very smooth recording too, so it's never too choppy. Artifacting is held at a minimum, which is great, but in lower lighting conditions, we tend to see a lot more noise in the shots, which in turn softens its details. And the one thing that we notice that when we're holding a tablet, when we're shooting something, sometimes we have this habit of covering up the microphone, so it tends to record some distorted audio, but aside from that, it's mostly clear, and generally speaking, we're very happy with the quality. Even with the inclusion of its high-resolution Retina display and beefier internals, the battery life is average here with the iPad mini with Retina display. It kind of matches what we saw last year with the iPad mini. For heavy usage, we're able to get by at least a solid 1 day. And when we're using it normally, not making it a primary driver, we're able to get close to a day and a half out of a fully charged battery. Now, this is what the first generation iPad mini should have been from the start, but regardless of that, we're finally happy that the Retina display is on board with it. Overall, the iPad mini with Retina display is a fantastic tablet. It excels in all the areas we want it to. You have that sharp, high-resolution display, you have a premium construction, a very intuitive and easy user experience, snappy performance, And heck, you can even take some pretty good photos and videos. However, the one thing we don't like is just the increase in price point. Last year's iPad mini started at $330. This year's iPad mini with Retina display starts at $400 for the base 16GB Wi-Fi only version. An expensive cost when you think about some of the other big players in the space right now. Knowing all that, it's a tough sell for the iPad mini with Retina display, especially if you think about some of the offerings out there. You could pay less, $100 less, and pick up the iPad mini first generation model for only $300, or if you want, you could pay $100 more and pick up the iPad Air for $500. Knowing all of that, it's a tough sell for the tablet just because there's a host of different options you could go with. Unless you want the latest and greatest and you want that smaller form factor of what it has to offer, then you might want to think about some of the other options out there. So if you guys want to learn more about the iPad mini with Retina display, you could check out our website, PhoneArena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.